hot where you are.
Okay, well, it's nice to see you, Chibuzor. I haven't seen you in a bit, so yay, welcome.
Yeah, it's that kind of day. It's May 29th. So new things are coming in. So I said coming
Indeed.
along with the new things.
Of course, of
Yeah.
course. All right, so we're starting off with the Daily Trust. Now, world leaders are in town to attend the inauguration of the president elect. Now, it's been reported that about 20 presidents from countries across the world are in Abuja to witness the inauguration.
Okay, so thank you, Zibby. So it's May 29th. We're finally here, and we're going to witness yet another seamless handover or transition from one civilian elected president to another. And for the presidential swearing in that is taking place at the Eagle Square in Abuja, we have over 20 leaders from across the world in town, with delegations from other major countries here to witness the handover of power from President Buhari to the incoming president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And across 28 states, we also have 28 governors being sworn in either for a fresh term or for a second term. And speaking to these ceremonies, they herald the commencement of a new era. Now, particularly with the incoming president, who has promised renewed hope and he has promised to hit the ground running, it's bated breath, fingers crossed, because he says he's determined to leave his stamp in the sands of time. Let's hope that Nigeria's problems do not prove too intractable for him to solve. And here's also hoping that he's much better than the outgoing president, because the outgoing president was simply in a class of his own. There has been no Nigerian president like him, and my sincere prayer is there will be no Nigerian president like him going forward. Now, having said that, we must begin to hold the governors being sworn in and the president being sworn in to their campaign promises. And it's of good note that there's a group that has promised to monitor all the campaign promises made by the incoming president. And I hope that they extend that to all the governors who are being sworn in. Now, the intractable problems, such as the fuel subsidy, which he needs to take a decision on. And if he decides to pull the trigger now, is he pulling the trigger completely or is he going to pull it in phases? Nigerians will need to know. Also, the issue of the state owned refineries. It's one of two things. It's either we get them to work or we sell them off to private investors who can then get them to work. Also, the bloated civil service workforce. We need to look at that. And the unbridled borrowings undertaken by the previous administration would need to be reviewed, would need to be addressed. He also needs to figure out very quickly how he's going to stimulate the economy to encourage the manufacturers, to encourage the private sector to come in. Another big problem for him is this issue of multiple forex rates. He has to ensure that he crashes or eliminates the parallel market rate and that the official market rate is reflective of our true realities. We've had situations in the past 8 years where foreign investors have been reluctant to bring in money because there's a huge differential between the official rate of 460 and the black market rate of about 700, 750. That needs to go. Also, the difficulty that foreign investors have continually experienced in getting the money out needs to be resolved. Because from the airline industry to private foreign investors, individuals or corporate bodies, we've had huge sums of money locked down in Nigeria that they can't take out. This needs to be resolved. So he needs to hit the ground running. He needs to roll up his sleeves. And it will be interesting to know how quickly he can come up with a cabinet that will get the work done. But fingers crossed, bated breath, and we'll see what happens.
So I like to chip in here. Mr. C said a lot about there was a word he kept on using, and that word is hope. Unfortunately, there are a lot of sayings and phrases around the word hope, but that's where we are as Nigerians. Whenever we go into an electoral cycle and we come out of an election, we can't do more than hope in most instances because of the processes and the ways we've gone around even picking and selecting our leadership. Now, it's not just about the people at the top; it's also about the people who are down below. And Mr. C also commented about the organization that wants to hold them accountable. But the proper thing and the thing at the end of the day is that the individuals, the citizens, the taxpayers, and the citizens. I don't want to remove all the other semantics. Of the citizens have to hold their governors, their leaders accountable, from the governor, from the level of the governors to the senators to the reps. We can't keep passing the buck and passing responsibilities across board. We need to actually hold these guys accountable to do the work that they have been elected to do. It's a bit hard to hold people accountable when they've not specifically promised you did specifics. They've told you, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Holding anybody accountable to, like, obviously, like, the outgoing government will tell you about the successes, but at the end of the day, when you benchmark those successes to what is on the street, a lot of people have different opinions about what has happened. But like I said, if you don't have specifics to hold people accountable to, then there's nothing much you can do. It's not our role to have excuses for the government. It's our responsibility as citizens to hold them accountable, not to be making excuses for them on the fly, which is what a lot of us tend to do. So we're hoping again for the best in the next 4 years, and watching, and hopefully we'll hold on accountable to what they're supposed to be doing for us as citizens, and we'll do our own bit also.
All right, from Daily Trust, the President Muhammadu Buhari has assented to a bill seeking to create a commission to cater to Almajiri and out-of-school children to prevent destitution and exploitation.
So I'd like to read something. I think the sponsor of the bill was Senator. I think it was Senator Kalale, and he said, that's from PDP Sokoto, and he actually said, congratulations to all stakeholders and citizens for this extraordinary feat to ensure justice, equity, and inclusiveness in education in Nigeria, where no child, whether Admajari or not, shall ever be left behind again. I think it's just, so I read that out because that's the context in which he's given to push this bill. So the bill in itself, it's supposed to provide some system for the Almajaris to be educated. Now, my first challenge is also even the choice of who are these Almajaris. How did we come by having Almajaris? We tend to try and solve problems that we've created, because in essence, we shouldn't be having these problems of Almajaris in the first place. What we have are basically young kids who have been born into families, or born in some part, largely in the northern part of the country, who are sent out to go to for Islamic study or religious study in particular places. They are not being taken care of their families, or at times their families pay some subvention and basically allowed in most instances to take care of themselves on the road. So, or take care of themselves whichever way they can take care of themselves. In some cases, they've been seen as a source of a societal nuisance of some sort. But the major focus here is the fact that they've missed out on education. And now, what kind of education? What systems of education are we talking about? Are we talking about they already supposed to be getting an Islamic education in a lot of instances? Are we talking about more formalized Western style education? How is the education going to be passed out? Because I do recall that in the Goodluck Jonathan era, there was some system that was targeted specifically towards our Almajiris and there was some system that was targeted specifically towards the Almajiris. I know that it came under a lot of criticism. That system came under a lot of criticism, and obvious the measurement of how successful that system was still leaves to be seen. But yes, there's a new law passed by. This new law has been passed. This bill has been assented to by the president. It was his Children's Day gift to the federation. While there was some resistance to this bill being passed, at the end of the day, it's been passed now. What I would like to see is how it's going to be implemented, the implementation and success will be measured over the years, and what do we expect to see out of it in the next 3 to 4 years? What fruits do we expect to see out of it? Because it's one thing to put in these things into system. Setting up an educational system or anything around education isn't as straightforward as just passing a bill. There are a lot of work that needs to be done, and we need to see that work being done if we want to see the things that we want out of it, because it's a major problem that we built over the years and we need to solve it now.
All right, let's go on to WhatsApp. We have some messages coming through. Ajayi says, history becomes today Nigeria as Asiwaju Bola Tinubu takes oath of office in another peaceful transfer of power from one government to another. God bless Nigeria. All right, and let's go on to Abbas. He says the outgoing president, just like formers, had their own challenges, but his gains far outweigh the former presidents who had resources but mismanaged them. The incoming president has a lot of good legacies in the outgoing president to improve on and correct a lot of his mistakes. Above all, we pray for a better Nigeria. Joseph says, is there any law that Nigeria can't trade in other countries' currencies? Example, China, where Nigeria has very huge trade volumes. Why can't we trade in their currency, thus reducing the pressure on the dollar?
I'm going to speak very simplistically about that challenge. So, when trade is a two-way, it's a multi-directional thing. You're spending, you want to trade in their currency. What do you want to give them back? So you want to buy stuff in yuan, or for the sake of China, for instance, what do you want to give them back? Naira. So when you give them naira, in instance, let's just say theoretically, how much of your products are they buying, or will they be stuck with bundles of naira on their table that they can't spend? So if you remember when we did the currency swap, there was a reason why there were limits attached to that currency swap, because there was so much of trade that could happen in the other direction. So China, for instance, probably did not want to, weren't going to expose themselves to that unlimited, unbridled exchange. Yes, we're doing a lot of trade, but most of that trade appears today to be in one direction. Nigerians going to China to buy in stuff and bringing stuff into the country. That's why we're spending. So while we are looking at it, while we talk, there's a lot of talk about spending in other currencies. We need to look at what are we spending on. I'm not one for banning or stopping importation, but we actually need to look at what else can we do internally. We have the refinery has come up from the point of Dangote. How many other Dangotes or industrialists are we able to push? How do we solve the problems of being able to manufacture anything? Because we do have comparative advantage in some spaces. Why don't we take advantage of it? It's not a case of banning outrightly things, but we need to look at trade is more complex than just saying, hey, we're going to switch from dollar to yuan or to whatever we want to switch to. So we need to look at it a bit more critically. Thanks.
All right, so you're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. Do stay with us, the show continues.
So most Nigerians, that argument always makes me laugh. When Nigerians say, oh, can't want to switch. Like, you're switching to our country. It doesn't solve your problems, really. We're not moving anything out of this country. Maybe like move to yuan. The problem with yuan, and I tell people, the problem with yuan and BRICS is that everybody is looking at China to make BRICS work. Unfortunately, China's comparative advantage is that their products are cheap, so their currency will always be devalued, which is always going to be a problem because their currency will never be at par. They are happy that the dollar is at whatever value to their currency, because it means that hey, I can push 20,000 whatever we are producing in Shanghai or whatever into the US easily and the rest of the world. You can go and get your dollar, you buy volume. But if I increase my currency, you can't buy those volumes.
I beg, transfer my
We
money
need to get that. This, we look for simplistic, let's just do this, will solve all our problems.
Sorry for yourself. I know for
You too can activate a First Money wallet and receive cash, make transfers, pay bills, and lots more, all with your phone number. Simply download the First Money wallet app or dial *894*1# to enjoy boundless transactions with or without
Yeah, because
data.
I think a lot of people at the top tend to
All money
just
now
throw those
on
things out.
First Money.
Like, oh,
You first.
There's
First
a
Bank.
manufacturer that can stop producing
The Smooth
Unilever.
Breakfast Show.
That's
We're on
what
Lagos.
Yeah.
You're tuned in and listening to Smooth
Right.
98.1.
Freshly pressed, Grapevine, The Locker Room, and more.
You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. To be a part of the conversation, all you need to do is send us a message via WhatsApp. It's 0809 440 And you can also tweet at Smooth981 and catch the live stream up on our YouTube channel as well. From Punch, the federal government has released and handed over a large crude carrier to the owners after fulfilling the conditions of the plea bargain entered between the owners and the Nigerian government.
Okay, thank you, Zibby. So let's track back for people who are not conversant with the story. Sometime in August 2022, the story broke out that a super tanker allegedly filled with 3 million barrels of crude oil fled Nigerian waters upon being pursued or intercepted by Nigerian naval vessels, and that this super tanker fled to Equatorial Guinea. Now, almost a year later, we're now informed that the federal government has entered into a plea bargain arrangement with the owners of the vessel, wherein they were made to pay fines which were instated, publish apologies in a national daily and the Lloyd's shipping register, and the vessel was returned to them. Now, under criminal law, plea bargains are a part of the system. So they're not unknown, they're not illegal. However, in arranging or accepting a plea bargain, it must be clear that substantial justice has been done in the matter and that the people are not getting off with a slap on the wrist. In this case, it's hard to tell how the prosecutors arrived at the decision to enter into a plea bargain, given the fact that they had previously alleged 3 million barrels of crude oil were on the vessel. Except, of course, they're now suggesting or telling Nigerians that the initial alarm was false. We didn't have crude oil on the vessel and we were just being alarmist. Because if that's not the case, then it's hard to understand the basis for this plea bargain. Okay, the fines that were paid, there's no material or reference to the quantum. And this is part of the reason why there's a trust deficit between the government and the people. Now, the people are wondering, was this a very nice arrangement between the government and the owners of the vessel? And since this fine is to be paid into the treasury of Nigeria, shouldn't Nigerians want to know what this amount is? So we do hope that with this new administration, because clearly this has been done and dusted, the vessel's been returned to them, the crew has been returned to the ship owners. We do hope with this new administration that these sorts of opaque and non-transparent arrangements will stop, and that when there's any transaction, any activity on behalf of the federal government, because of their inherent duty to be transparent, to be accountable to the Nigerian people, the necessary details will be made public. Again, this is not a security matter that you will say that it affects the national security of Nigeria. If fines were paid, what is the quantum? And two, what is there to suggest that this will not repeat itself? So it's incumbent on the incoming administration not to make the mistakes of previous administrations and ensure that this sort of non-transparent behavior stops.
Is a plea bargain always an admission of guilt?
A plea bargain essentially is an admission of guilt, because you can't. What are you bargaining for? If you're innocent, there's no reason, there's no motive, there's no incentive to enter into a plea bargain. A plea bargain is an admission of guilt, but give me a reduced sentence.
All right, let's go on to the messages. Gilbert says, on Almajiri children, it's important to identify parents of these children to know the reasons their children are not in school. Also, we need to check population growth in Nigeria. Austin, once again, your comments reek of a lot of ethnic bigotry, and that is not the best way to go. There are nicer ways to get your points across, Austin. All right, so let's move on to the next headline, and let's just scroll down on to get that one. 0809 440 981. That is the WhatsApp number. You can also tweet at smooth981. From Premium Times, the House of Representatives has increased the limit within which the federal government can borrow from the CBN. Now, in an emergency session, this bill was passed yesterday to amend Section 38 of the CBN Act.
So yesterday, our House of Representatives spent good time to make this happen. So yeah, I think we should give them a round of applause. They've added to our, well, potentially added to our collective debt. And like what I always say that I'm going to push my cynicism to one side, but debt isn't necessarily bad, like most of us would know. Depends on what you're doing with the debt and how you're able to pay back that debt. So if you have a plan to pay it back, if you're doing something of value that can pay back the debt, then it's always fine. So what the House of Reps have done in this instance is basically to pass a bill that allows, so within the constitution there are restrictions to how much the federal government can borrow from the CBN at a given time. This was put to 5%, I think, of the previous year's revenue, and what they've done is to be able to increase it to 15%. So basically, you can take much more money from the CBN and increase the internal indebtedness to the CBN, who seems to be their lender of choice these days. Like I said, it's not much different from what has happened previously. The government has come out and said we want to take these loans, and it's quite interesting that obviously it's the outgoing government, obviously who are exiting today, that have pushed for this. I don't know. Obviously, I know that they have a list of things that they want to learn for, but we'll see how it works in terms with the incoming government, how they're going to take advantage of that or otherwise. Like I said, the major challenge with debt, and I think it's not something that we should overflog in Nigeria today. Obviously, a lot of us are worried about how much debt we are taking forward, especially in these times where we don't seem to be making up enough revenue to pay for it. Is what are we doing with the debt? Are we going into projects that are strategic that will pay for themselves? Or are we just going into, is it half of it going to go into corruption, either by inflated procurements, paybacks, settlements, whatever we're doing with it, or are we just building projects because we want to keep our political supporters or people who have supported the governments politically happy? So we have gotten to the point where we have lean wallets as a country, and we need to put every dime that we have in the right direction to make the right revenue back for us. So that's all I'll say about that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chibuzor, for that. Ladile says, today Nigeria presses the reset button. Okay, I can't see what is underneath because it's not in English, but yes, thank you, Ladile, for your message. From Vanguard, NUPENG, which is the Nigeria Union of Petroleum and Natural Gas Workers, has cancelled the incoming president not to be in a hurry in removing the subsidies because of the obvious socio-economic implications.
Okay, thank you, Zibby. So, here we are again with the fuel subsidy conundrum. Now, this is a matter that has defied all attempts to understand it and solve it. Now, what is the fuel subsidy regime in effect? It's basically a system whereby the federal government subsidizes the cost of petrol to the end user, which is the average Nigerian on the street. Now, why do they do that? The official reason before this week or last week was the state-owned refineries were not working, and we had to move our crude oil abroad to refineries located outside Nigeria to refine, and then we bring in the refined petrol at increased costs and for Nigerians to use. Now, at the height of the fuel subsidy regime, we were told that our daily consumption was 66 million by the NNPC. The Comptroller General for Customs had a challenge with that figure, and he gave facts to back it up. Because at 66 million liters, we should see an average of 4,000 tankers on our roads every day. 2,000 taking product, 2,000 returning. That never happened. Now, the Dangote refinery finally comes on stream, and we're told that it can fully satisfy Nigeria's daily petrol demand of 53 million liters, which is a sharp drop from 66 million liters. So what that means is some very intelligent Nigerians, in quote, have been creaming off 13 million liters for a long period of time. Anyways, to the story. So NUPENG is saying do not be in a hurry to end the fuel subsidy regime. To a certain extent, I agree with them, from the perspective that we can't do it in one fell swoop, because the socio-economic effects will be too hard for Nigeria to absorb. So I'm of the opinion that it should be staggered over a period of time to give Nigerians the ability to make the necessary adjustments, because we must also understand and remember that whenever this fuel subsidy regime goes, irrespective of what they've told us about savings going to be made, the cost of goods and services will go up. It's a given. It's going to happen. Even rent, everything will go up. So there must be measures in place to cushion the shock of this removal. And they've also indicated that the refineries must work. Now, given the age of the refineries, given the technology that was in place when they were manufactured, I'm also of the considered opinion that just hand over the 3 refineries to private investors. They will get them to run. For as long as they remain government owned, we will continue to pay refinery workers for doing next to nothing whilst we don't see the product coming out from the refineries. So that's my take, and I wish the incoming administration will also be on the same page and stagger the implementation of a removal and phase it so that Nigerians do not totally suffer in one fell swoop.
So and obviously subsidy has been a big issue. Subsidy and subsidy removal has been a big issue for many years. I'm also of the same opinion as Mr. C, that at some point, obviously, we need to phase out subsidy because of what it means, not because of the way it's been abused, it's been grossly abused within Nigeria. Now, does removal of the subsidy solve the problem? No, because obviously we have a bigger problem, which is the theft. And when you have systems that allow for theft, yes, arbitrage allows arbitrage, which is what they're doing, basically taking whatever they have and able to sell it for better prices outside, happens in any imperfect economic system. But what you've had now is you have the downright robbery. You have people there is a space of arbitrage and they're actually getting paid for doing this again. And like the numbers we pushed out, we don't have it's sad to say that we don't have a specific number of how much we actually require for this consumption in this country. We throw around these numbers. One government comes throws around one number, another government comes throws around the number, and you ask ourselves, how do we do our planning in this country when we don't know exactly what we need? It's interesting when the customs are the ones giving us alternate numbers, where their function also is to stop some of these things from going out. But Nigeria is one thing that everybody just keeps pointing fingers around without actually doing anything. The guys at the NNPC or formerly NNPC will come and, oh, hey, they stole this, and you didn't need to tell us. You're in charge of making sure they don't steal it, but you're coming to just give us reports. We're in the situation where now the people of the citizens, a lot of the guys at the bottom end of the table have to now pay the full cost for it. And like Mr. C says, the cost will be paid. So yes, I do agree with them. The government shouldn't be in a hurry to remove it, but do we have to remove it at some point? Yes, we do. But also, do we have to put in measures to stop a recurrence of this? Because, like I said, Nigerians are very smart. We have very smart people. They are there to take advantage of whatever situation. So, remove subsidy, give them something else. They will play around the same rules if you allow them to play around the same rules.
All right, we're out of time, but I'm going to read a few messages. This one is from Izehi, and Izehi says, common sense and logic tells me that expecting anything good from a grossly corrupt process is, well, unwise. And Dapo says, we welcome the pair of Asiwaju and Shatima by the special grace of God. They shall be a dynamic and not a diabolic duo. Well, that is all the time that we have for Freshly Pressed this morning. Thanks for your messages. Thank you for listening, and special thanks to our analysts as well, Mr. C and Chibuzor. You stay with us, there's a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast.